Good afternoon, everyone. The meeting for the Assembly on the Committee of Growth and Infrastructure will come to order. Will the committee secretary please call the roll?
Assemblywoman Brown May.
Here.
Assemblyman Ellison.
Present.
Assemblyman Levitt.
Here.
Assemblyman Miller.
Here.
Assemblywoman Peters.
Here.
Assemblyman Roberts. Assemblywoman Summers Armstrong.
Here.
Assemblyman Watts.
Here.
Assemblyman Wheeler.
Here.
Assemblyman Yeager.
Here.
Chair Monroe Moreno.
And I am here. Will you please mark Assemblyman Thomas Roberts? He will be a little late. He's presenting a bill in another committee. As soon as he arrives, Madam Secretary, I will let you know that he is in the meeting. I'd like to welcome everyone to today's meeting for Growth and Infrastructure. Today, we will hold hearings on 4 bills that have been sponsored by the Assembly Committee on Growth and Infrastructure on behalf of the Nevada Department of Transportation. We are joined today by Director Swallow, who will provide a general introduction to these measures, and I understand there are several department staff members who will be speaking to the specifics of each bill today. But before we begin, we'll start with the thing that you probably heard a million times in every committee, but we must repeat it. All of our meetings are virtual. The legislative building remains closed to the public, and so all committee meetings, committee members, staff, and everyone else will be participating either through Zoom or by telephone. For committee members, if you could please remember to silence your electronic devices, particularly your phones, during the meeting, and make sure that you keep your mics muted unless you are speaking. That helps minimize the background noise. Please leave your cameras on so that we can maintain a quorum throughout our meeting. And please state your name for the record every time you unmute your mic to speak. It helps keep accurate records and meeting minutes. Members of the public who wish to testify or present public comment today may do so. And you have an option to call in or submit written testimony. Your comments can be submitted to the committee up to 48 hours after the meeting. And this can be done online at the page for today's meeting, which is on Nellis, where you'll find today's agenda. I'm committed to giving each matter before this committee a proper hearing and to allow as many individuals as possible to offer testimony in support, opposition, and neutral positions. I would encourage those wishing to offer testimony on a measure to do so in writing to ensure we receive your full statement. In the interest of time, testimony by phone may have to be limited if there are many participants wanting to speak on a matter. Anyone can submit testimony in writing by using the submit option, which is on Nellis, and that's located on the webpage for today's meeting, or by emailing our committee at asmgi@asm.state.nv.us. To make sure the best use of the limited time, please avoid repeating points that have already been made. Ditto, I agree, those comments are sufficient. If multiple people are here representing the same industry or specific interest, I encourage you to coordinate to make sure the points you have in common are presented. And please avoid reading long statements. Instead, please summarize and focus on the key points of your testimony and provide your written testimony to the committee staff within 48 hours of today's meeting. All the materials submitted for the meeting will be posted on the committee's page, which is on the legislature's website. The meeting can be viewed through our streaming service or the legislature's YouTube channel, both of which can be accessed on the website. If you have missed a meeting in the past and you'd like to know what happened, all the committee meetings are recorded and posted on the website, usually by the next business day. Anyone who would like to receive an electronic notification of the committee's agendas or minutes can do so by signing up on the Nevada Legislature's website or by contacting the committee manager. So with that, we will move on to a first bill that we will be hearing today, and I will open the hearing on AB 12.
Chairwoman Monroe Moreno, this is Christina Swallow, the director of the Nevada DOT. And in the interest of time, I just wanted to tell the committee that we will have subject matter experts on all 4 of the bills. They will introduce themselves as their bill is called. They'll have a short presentation, and I am available, as will they be available, to answer any questions throughout the duration of the hearing. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to our first subject matter expert, Deputy Director Cole Mortensen, for AB 12.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the committee. As Director Swallow mentioned, I'm Cole Mortensen. I'm a Deputy Director for the Department of Transportation. And what I'd like to do just briefly is to present AB 12 and a little bit of history as to why we'd like to make some of these changes. Over the last year and a half, as many of you know, we have 3 Deputy Director positions. And over the last year and a half, we've had 4 of them retire. And so we've had a lot of opportunities to try to find good people to fill those roles. And we feel that the language in existing statute is a little bit limiting, especially when it comes to internal staff advancement. So the first part of AB 12 really speaks to the qualifications of the Deputy Director. And we feel that just making a few changes will allow us to have a wider, more diverse pool of candidates to be able to select from as we look to fill existing vacancies and future vacancies. The second portion of AB 12 has to do with the chief engineer. And I believe that this is just a little bit of cleanup from back in 2013 when the assistant directors were made unclassified positions from classified. And I believe that the chief engineer was intended to be an executive within the department. And so really all of our executives are now unclassified employees. So we wanted to make the change of the designation of chief engineer to be unclassified. And that concludes my presentation.
Thank you so much for that introduction. Members, do you have any questions for the department on AB 12? I believe Assemblywoman Summers Armstrong has a question.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Director Swallow and Mr. Mortensen, for your presentation. I am curious, or concerned, I should say, in your language where you say that 2 years of administrative experience as an assistant director or chief engineer. If you are recruiting outside of your agency, if this is an open recruitment, could that limit your pool of possible candidates if you are specific about the types of titles that they have to have when all other agencies within the state of Nevada and maybe even outside the state may not classify the positions in this particular way? And so I'm kind of curious and concerned that you may be limiting your pool if you are so specific about these types of job titles. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the question. For the record, Cole Mortensen, Deputy Director. We're hopeful that with this language that the two, I guess the two requirements are really an or. And so we hope that the second point of having 15 years of progressively responsible experience in engineering or project management not only opens it up further to outside candidates, but it also helps us open it up further to internal candidates that may not have progressed as far as in their career as being an assistant director or the chief engineer.
Madam Chair, may I have a follow-up? Thank you. The issue that I have is that the language does not say or. The only or is 2 years of administrative experience or the chief engineer. And I think that if you're looking at 1 and 2 to be either an and or an or, I think you have to be a little bit more specific about that, because I could see someone being disqualified because this is so specific and does not say or. Thank you.
For the record, Cole Mortensen, Deputy Director. I may have a different version of the bill, but following the chief engineer, there's a semicolon, and we're hopeful that the or after that semicolon makes that an optional requirement.
Assemblywoman Summers Armstrong.
Thank you, ma'am. Yes, that's sufficient. Thank you. And I apologize, Mr. Mortensen. My 4 eyes missed the blue semicolon and the or after it. It's been a long day. Thank you so much, sir.
Next, we have Assemblyman Wheeler.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Mortensen, can you explain, well, first off, I'd like to tell you, you had a beautiful background there, so I thought I'd join you. And, but secondly, I thought, could you explain to us the difference between classified and unclassified for the committee's edification?
Absolutely. For the record, Cole Mortensen. For us, classified employees are appointed and are in our department serve at the will of the director.
Thank you. So unclassified would be hired and go through HR, et cetera?
That is correct.
Excuse me, Christina Swallow, for the record. I think we got those flipped.
Yes, I do apologize. We got those flipped. Classified or unclassified appointments, or unclassified employees are appointed. Classified employees go through all of the statutory requirements with human resources and all the other requirements.
Any follow-up, Assemblyman?
No, I just wanted to tell Mr. Mortensen, I know that what he said was different, but what I heard was what he meant.
Perfect. Assemblywoman Peters.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have a question about the 15-year experience. Can you just tell us a little bit about how you came up with 15 years versus 10 years or 14 years? What's the magic about 15?
You know, for these roles, I guess we kind of looked at, you know, your average career length. I apologize, for the record, Cole Mortensen, Deputy Director. For these roles, we kind of looked at your average career length being 30 years and felt that somebody that has 15 years worth of progressively responsible engineering or project management experience would likely have the necessary background to be successful in the position. But what it also allows us to do is to evaluate those candidates and determine whether or not we feel that those 15 years worth of experience would be, in fact, effective experience for them to be in the position.
So 15 years of experience as an engineer. I mean, I can think of people who have experience being like an environmental specialist or an engineering technician who don't necessarily have the experience of the PE under their name. Are you requiring that 15 years be with a PE behind their name?
For the record, Cole Mortensen, Department of Transportation. The first, well, actually, it's the second requirement after being in the unclassified service for the deputy director requires that they hold a master's degree in public or business administration, a degree, a Bachelor of Science in civil engineering, structural or mechanical or industrial engineering, or be a licensed professional engineer. So we feel that having either professional engineering or project management, that the project management would cover those that potentially have a public administration degree where they've been a part of planning and moving projects forward. And we feel that that kind of covers that requirement.
Great, thank you.
Assemblyman Watts.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just have one other quick question while we're getting clarity on all the provisions in the bill. So I see that the language is being stricken in subsection C1 about experience as the head of the engineering or planning division of the department. So can you just very briefly explain why that was taken out as an option, just leaving the chief engineer or assistant director under that category?
Absolutely. For the record, Cole Mortensen, Deputy Director. We struck the head of the engineering or planning division because we think that it's older language. We also have an operations division where we have a professional engineer that manages our operations group. And so we just felt that it was an unnecessary provision to have within the statute.
Thank you for that. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Members, any other questions for the presenters of the introduction of AB 12? Okay. See none. I thank the presenters for the introduction, and next we will hear testimony in support of AB 12. And again, as a reminder, you may express your position on legislation in writing on Nellis, on the webpage for today's meeting, or by email to the address listed on the agenda for today's meeting. If you are providing testimony by phone, please remember to state and spell your name clearly for the record. Broadcast and production services, are there any callers in the queue wishing to provide testimony in support of AB 12?
To testify in support of Assembly Bill 12, please press *9 now to take your place in the queue. Caller with the last 3 digits of 232, please slowly spell and state your name for the record. You may begin.
Thank you, Chair and members of the committee. For the record, my name is David Dazlich, D-A-Z-L-I-C-H, Director of Government Affairs for the Vegas Chamber, testifying today in support of AB 12. We think this is a good common sense bill that will support the department as they look to promote internal members of their organization who are qualified for these jobs. We are GS vote. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other callers in the queue for support?
Testify in support of Assembly Bill 12. Please press *9 now to take your place in the queue. Chair, there are no further callers in support of AB 12 at this time.
Thank you. Can we ask if there's any callers in opposition?
To testify in opposition of Assembly Bill 12, please press *9 now to take your place in the queue. Chair, there are no callers in opposition to Assembly Bill 12.
Thank you. Then finally, are there any callers who wish to testify in neutral for Assembly Bill 12?
To testify in the neutral position for Assembly Bill 12, please press *9 now to take your place in the queue. Chair, there are no callers in the neutral position in Assembly Bill 12 at this time.
Thank you so much. So are there any final remarks from the sponsors of this bill? Seeing none, I will close the hearing on Assembly Bill 12, and I will open the hearing for Assembly Bill 41.
Hi, good afternoon, Madam Chair, Vice Chair, and members of the committee. My name is Maya Bourgeois. I'm the Interim Chief with Administrative Services, and I am here representing AB 41, and I would like to provide you an overview of our proposed changes.
Welcome to the committee.
Thank you, and give me a second while I try to pull up all the information I need. All right, are you able to see my screen okay?
This is broadcast. You are still in presenter mode. Could you swap your screens?
Thank you. Wonderful. Okay.
It's okay. It's at the top taskbar.
Oh, it's
there.
Still there.
There. Yeah. Try it. Do a swap screen. Give it a minute. Now it just looks like it's frozen. Would you stop share screen and try that again, please?
I apologize for that. It's like your worst fear is the screen share part. Let me see if I can get it back. If you don't mind, I'm going to have to pull it up again, but if I can do this somewhat quickly.
No worries. It happens to us all. It's okay.
It's definitely a new way of presenting.
Yes.
I'll give it 1 second to hopefully get caught up with you guys, and then let me know if it's still in the presenter mode. Shouldn't be, but.
This is broadcast. You are in full screen now. Please continue.
All right, that's a win right there. Thank you. Overdimensional vehicle permits is regulated by NRS 484D and NAC 484D. The overdimensional section is responsible for issuing oversized overweight permits for the entire state. Oversized overweight vehicles include all non-reducible, non-divisible vehicle combinations or loads that exceed 80,000 pounds gross weight, or exceed 8 feet, 6 inches in width, or exceed 15 feet in height, or exceed 10 feet of front or rear overhang, or exceed 70 feet in length, as well as shorter overweight vehicles that qualify as a commodity that exceeds 80,000 pounds but does not exceed 70 feet in length. Since 2017, Overdimensional has issued on average 33,212 permits per year. The ODVP section is comprised of 2 employees, 1 supervisor, and 1 permit agent. There are 3 areas of NRS 484D that NDOT is proposing to change. These changes will improve public and infrastructure safety, streamlining the permit application process, and aligning the requirements with the growth of the manufactured mobile home industry. The following is a quick overview of our current regulations. Within NRS 484D 605 and .725, the measuring of the height, width, and length of a load is not specified. Next, within 484D .685, .715, .720, and .725, the requirements state that permit application must be made in writing. Lastly, within NRS 484D .720, there is restrictive language that does not allow a manufactured or mobile home over 16 wide to travel on Nevada roadways or highways. NDOT is proposing the following changes: adding clarifying language to NRS 484D .605 and .725 on how a load is to be measured. In regards to the height, it'll be measured from the surface on which the vehicle carrying the load stands, length from the front bumper or front overhang to the rear bumper or rear overhang, whichever is greater, width, the widest point on each side. Specifying this measurement will provide consistency across the industry and reduce potential risk to public safety and or damage to infrastructure. Under 484D, 0.685, 0.715, 0.720, and 0.725, we're proposing to expand how applications can be submitted by removing the words "in writing." This will allow the department to collect applications through different methods with the focus being on electronic submission. This will align with our current practices with our online permitting system, reduce the manual data entry by ODVP staff, and streamline the application process, which will result in issuing permits quicker. The proposed change to NRS 484D.720 is to allow the department to grant a waiver to permit a transport of a manufactured or mobile home or any similar type of structure or vehicle structure that are wider than 16 feet with additional conditions. This waiver will remove the restrictive barrier and allow for continued growth of the industry. This will also align Nevada with our neighboring states of Arizona, Oregon, and Idaho, who currently allows 16 wide transports of manufactured or mobile homes. In addition, this will provide an opportunity for citizens to be able to purchase larger homes and or companies and citizens to purchase larger module buildings and or office trailers. In closing, these changes will allow the department to update and align our application process with current practices and methods, enhance public and infrastructure safety by clarifying how a load is measured, and allow manufactured or mobile homes over 16 wide to travel on Nevada roadways and highways with additional conditions. Thank you for your consideration, and I'm here to answer any questions.
Thank you so much for the presentation and introduction of the bill. I know I have a few members with questions, and I will start with Assemblywoman Peters.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My question has to do with the application process. I'm just wondering about the adequacy of removing "in writing" and also concerns related to folks who don't have access to digital applications. I'm not familiar enough with your applications to know whether they're mobile friendly and how much speed you have to have access to in order to have access to those online, or if it's a billable PDF. I know I run across those quite often in state agencies. So could you just talk a little bit more about the adequacy of this removal?
Absolutely. For the record, Maya Bourgeois, the strike through of the "in writing" does not prohibit us to keep continuing to receive applications in writing. We're just looking at opening that door and removing that restrictive language to where right now, with applications having to be in writing. So we still give everybody that opportunity if they want to submit in writing. We do have fillable forms as well, and we do have an online system. We are trying to gravitate more towards the electronic means. It's obviously a lot easier. We're able to, everybody's able to have like their own account in there, so they can, once they go back in to ask for or request another permit, all their information will be there and they can easily resubmit. But right now the process is for a paper application, especially during COVID, they would still have to go online currently to download and then turn around and submit via mail. So we're hoping with just removing that restrictive "in writing" and providing a lot more options will allow the department to grow as well as our customer base. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me. And I have to admit, going through well logs, people's handwritings are not always so great. Yes. That can result in errors in the interpretation into a format or databaseable application. So thank you. I appreciate your comment.
Thank you.
Thank you. Assemblyman Levitt.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for the presentation. I just had a question on the width, maximum width. So previously it could go up to 192 inches, 16 feet in width. And under this provision, you could get a waiver to exceed that. But but it doesn't, it's kind of limited to, it looks, by the writing, it looks like it's limited to the discretion of whoever is granting the waiver as to how wide it can be. Is there anything in the conditions prescribed by the Department of Transportation on a maximum width that's allowable? That whoever is granting the waiver, if they choose to do so, is bound to?
For the record, Maya Bourgeois, thank you for the question. Yes, so we are expanding it. We are moving that restriction off of a waiver, and it is currently going to be determined by the department, seeing what the other states are doing and where this industry is going. Right now, we get minimal questions or minimal requests, only a couple a year, and with the widening of these manufactured and mobile homes, they're not exceeding levels of where we consider it almost super load level. So they are looking at just over 16 feet, 17 feet, 18 feet is really what we're seeing as what's coming through and the growth of that industry. So we do leave it subjective. What we did do in there though is that we added with additional conditions. That's allowing us to actually attach NHP to these loads. So currently right now with 16 wide, they have to have a front pilot car and a pilot car in the rear. With anything over 16, we do involve NHP, and then NHP does make the determination with the route and the type of load with the dimensions, how many staff members need to be attached to that for safe moving. Does that answer your question?
Follow up, Madam Chair. So I wonder if it would be this is mainly for the protection of whoever is designated to grant these waivers. You know, I don't know that it would be difficult to look at the most expansive roadway that we have in Nevada and come up with a number. And that's the not to exceed number, so that they're not trying to figure out what they can go up to, and they're not on the hook for it. And I just feel like there has to be some maximum width prescribed beyond conditions prescribed by the Department of Transportation.
For the record, Maya Bourgeois, you bring up a really good question. So right now what staff does is that they evaluate each route that is being requested, including the load and all the dimensions and the weight. They determine at that point in time what the safest route is in and around construction to their destination that they need to go to. So they know if it's 2 lanes, 4 lanes, what that capacity looks like over the bridges. So there is an analysis done. If there's over a certain like 16 wide, there's definitely an analysis done looking to see what is the best way to get them from point A to point B safely for the public safety and for the truck drivers themselves. So it is determined at that time. We do also do super loads, and there are certain roads that they can only go on. Depending on the size, weight, height, so on and so forth. So it is analyzed at that time, each and every route. And it's the permitting department, it's a permitting section that actually goes through all of those steps and then finalizes that permit and issues it to that truck driver.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Did that answer your question? You still look like you.
It didn't really answer my question. I mean, an analysis isn't a prescribed step, right? An analysis is an analysis. So you by analysis, you could go as wide as you want, as long as you can justify it through analysis. And so I just figure, I just feel like you need to have a prescribed width just for everyone's benefit. But I'm not satisfied with the answer.
Yes, go ahead.
Christina Swallow for the record, and Maya, thank you. I'm just going to jump in and when Maya mentioned the super loads, There are specific routes that they're able to traverse simply because those routes are capable of managing a larger load. However, there are conditions and times where an extreme load, a super load, it may need to go in a certain, and so then we can work with the permittee to find out, are there pieces of infrastructure that they may need to remove and replace? We work with them, which is why we don't put a maximum on there, so that there is flexibility. If something that's not typical, it's abnormal, needs to traverse the state, we can find a way to work with them. Now that means that they may be responsible for removing and replacing certain pieces of infrastructure, putting down additional equipment to protect infrastructure while they traverse. And so that's why we don't put a maximum. We're not the only state that permits over-dimensional vehicle permits either. And so most of these over-dimensional vehicles are working through multiple states at the same time. If we were to put a maximum there, then we might run into periods where we need to put in a waiver for that because they were able to traverse across 5 states and then they hit Nevada, and we would no longer be able to allow them across Nevada. So we request the flexibility to continue to monitor it, but do respect the awareness that you're suggesting that we provide for our permittees. And there may be something we can put on the paperwork that indicates typical or something along those lines, but without restricting it to a maximum.
Thank you so much, Director Swallow. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Assemblyman Ellenson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just got a couple comments. I see a lot of these heavy equipments like on the display there that you had going through the tunnels, and what they're trying to do is get them from like 20 miles away from the mine site to where they got to repair them. The only way to get them there is the highway. That's it. That's the only way they can get them to there. And I see all the highway patrol before and behind, and then they try to get the traffic around them as long as anytime they can. But I noticed there's 2 pictures there that come out of the Carlin tunnels, and the old highway that went out and around. Do you guys use that anymore? Because it used to be they would divert away from the tunnels and go around it and then come back onto the highway.
For the record, Maya Bourgeois, yes, we do actually use still that old route. There is restrictions on it, and I can find that information for you on what those restrictions are, how much weight and what we're able to move on that, but we do still use that.
Well, I appreciate everything you guys do for safety on this, because it's amazing. And if you guys look at that picture of that bucket going through that tunnel, it's amazing how they can get that thing. They go so slow and how they do it. But you guys do a great job of getting this done. And now they're building these manufactured housing out of Idaho, and you've got to deal with that. But you've done a great job. So thank you.
Thank you.
Assemblyman Miller.
Hello, excuse me. Thank you. My question, and Ms. Swallows, you kind of hit on it a bit there by mentioning the cost of infrastructure protection or upgrades that would need to be covered by the entity that's bringing the large or the super load through. But as far as the added support from NHP and things like that, how is that cost covered? Is it covered through the entity that's also bringing the package through, or is it covered just, through our NHP budget?
For the record, Maya Bourgeois, thank you for the question. Those costs are covered and discussed and negotiated between NHP and the trucking company itself. I believe they do get into a contract with each other, and price is determined at that time, but that it does not affect us or impact us, and we're not involved with that at that point.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. So I just have one question, just out of curiosity. In section 5, section 1, you're adding verbiage that says measured from the surface of which the vehicle stands. Is that currently being done and you're just putting in clarifying language, or is the measurement from the ground up to the top of the load being carried?
So right now it is being measured, from the ground up. We just had to put in the clarifying information because we have received phone calls where it got a little confusing with measuring a load, because the load by itself is on top of the trailer. So if they're measuring from the bottom of the load all the way to the top, that leaves about 4 feet. So it leaves a big difference between the overall measurements. So we have had several different calls on this over the years. So we are trying to clarify from the ground at which it's on. So even if it was on a concrete pad or something, measuring it from there all the way to the top of the load.
And then by measuring it from what it's sitting on, does it account for the tires? Because there's different sizes of tires by the load that's being carried. So how is that accommodated?
For the record, Maya Bourgeois, thank you for the question. Yes, so it is from the ground from which it's on. So below the tires, like right at where the tire meets whatever it is standing on, all the way up to the top of the load.
Perfect. Well, thank you. Members, any other questions? Okay. I am not seeing any. So I thank you for the introduction, and then we will move to hear testimony in support of Assembly Bill 41.
To testify in support of Assembly Bill 41, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Caller with the last 3 digits 080. Please slowly spell and state your name for the record. You may begin. Caller with the last 3 digits 080. Please press star 6 to unmute. Slowly spell and state your name for the record. You may begin.
Thank you. For the record, my name is Susan Fisher, SUSAN-FISHER, with McDonald Carano, speaking today on behalf of Nevada Housing Alliance, which is the statewide association for manufactured and modular home dealers. I'm speaking today in support of AB 41, specifically the proposed language in Section 4, which allows NDOT to grant a waiver for transporting manufactured and modular homes that are oversized. Having the ability for our transporters to have more options and ways to request a transport permit also is very, very helpful. The majority of manufactured and modular homes coming to home purchasers in Nevada, at least in the northern part of the state, come in from Idaho. I will note also, for safety purposes, the homes can only be transported during the light of day. I want to sincerely thank NDOT and Maya Bourgeois and the great staff who've taken our calls and worked with us to help get homes delivered to our customers. I appreciate the opportunity to speak in support of AB 41. I urge your support, and I'd be happy to try to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Next caller.
Caller with the last 3 digits 580. Please press star 6 to unmute. Please slowly spell and state your name for the record. You may begin.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the committee. For the record, I am Paul Enos, E-N-O-S. I am the CEO of the Nevada Trucking Association, calling today in support of Assembly Bill 41. This does clarify rules that verification of measurements for height, length, and over width, and we also appreciate the flexibility the department has for mobile homes. We do understand sometimes these road conditions change depending on construction, depending on the height of the mobile home that they're transporting. Can it go over a barrier that has been put up on the highway or not? So we do appreciate NDOT taking a look at these conditions. We have about 80 mobile home carriers in the state of Nevada that this will impact. And I also want to thank our folks at NDOT at the overweight, oversized permitting office. They do a fantastic job and are great folks to work with. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any other callers in support?
Chair, there are no further callers in support of AB 41 at this time.
Thank you. Do we have any callers in opposition of AB 41?
To testify in opposition of Assembly Bill 41, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Chair, we have no callers in opposition of AB 41.
Thank you. Then we will move on to neutral. Do we have any callers in neutral for AB 41?
To testify in the neutral position for Assembly Bill 41, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Chair, we have no callers in the neutral position at this time.
Thank you. Then I will ask the presenters if they have any closing remarks for AB 41 before I close this hearing. Well, seeing none, we will close the hearing for AB 41. And we will move on to the next item on our agenda, which is Assembly Bill 53, which revises the provisions related to the establishment of certain systems of communications on our highways. And I will invite the presenters to the floor. You can start as soon as you're ready.
Hopefully my screen is visible.
It is, yes, we can see.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And good afternoon, Madam Chair, Vice Chair, and members of the committee. For the record, Seth Daniels, Assistant Chief Traffic Operations Engineer for the Nevada Department of Transportation, presenting on Assembly Bill 53. And starting off with the brief history, 1960s marked the first installation of highway call boxes. This was a solar-powered emergency call system installed on 10 miles of freeways in Los Angeles. The main proliferation of call boxes occurred in the 1980s and 1990s, with roughly 16,000 units installed statewide in California, nearly 3,000 units installed on the Florida Turnpike, and around 1,000 units installed on the Pennsylvania Turnpike. The last nationwide survey that was identified in our literature search was in 2003, and the 3 example states mentioned accounted for 20 of the 24,000 highway call boxes in the US, the rest being distributed among the other 18 states who installed highway call box systems. In comparing the 2003 survey to the nationwide survey performed in 1996, less than 300 call boxes were installed in that 7-year period, indicating a plateau of the installations. Now, specific to Nevada, NRS 408, the most frequently traveled highways, and directing a study to identify best practices. The statute was amended again in 2001, changing the may to a shall, and directing the installation of a system of communication between the California border and Las Vegas, including an appropriation of $500,000. As a current status, we have now reached end of manufacturer support for the call box system hardware and are nearing end of functionality for the radio technology used. Nevada's call box volumes have become consistently low, as indicated on the slide from system logs. Regular discussions about the future of the system began approximately 3 years ago in regular monthly meetings between NHP radio and dispatch staff, our NDOT District 1 communications maintenance staff, and our NDOT traffic operations technology group. At that time, Julie Butler from NHP, who represented their dispatch group, and of course, who is now the director of the DMV, asked about the removal of the call box system due to continued low volume of calls. These discussions were necessarily involved. Our call boxes have been an effective tool during their nearly 20-year lifespan, and recently, specific instances. It is certainly understandable that there are difference of opinions that remained, and the obvious difficult questions around helping stranded motorists. We also wanted to make sure that the research of national practices supported any recommendation we made in moving forward with this. we found that both installations and removals remained relatively quiet between the early 2000s and the early 2010s. For our example states, call boxes on the Florida Turnpike were removed in 2013, excepting 4 boxes on a large bridge that were updated and rerouted to a crisis counseling system for suicide prevention. The call boxes on the Pennsylvania Turnpike were completely removed in 2017. California was a little harder to track in our research. Ongoing project funding was created through an amount added to vehicle registration fees, but was dispersed to regional transportation organizations for the installation and maintenance. Documents found in the literature search indicated that approximately 75% of the call boxes in California had been removed by 2017. There was not a lot of data available after these major removals were complete, as further removals were on a much smaller scale. Overall, the least aggressive standard for call box removal we found in our research was at 5 or fewer calls per box per year, and the national usage declines were consistently between 95 and 98% by 2018. So on to safety. It is interesting that the research performed in the 1990s found a low rate of risk in exiting vehicles on highways for activities such as utilizing call boxes. As shown by the 12% figure in the slide, this is a stark contrast to current national research statistics and best practices. There are many factors involved, and distracted or impaired driving would likely be at the top. The stopping recommendations shown on the slide were pulled from AAA guidelines and are also widespread in regional national programs such as zero fatalities. Of course, there are situations where exiting a vehicle will be necessary, and occupants should clear the roadway prism to the extent possible. Also, given this information, walking along the interstate to the nearest call box is of strong concern. Even though responders are significantly more equipped, unfortunately, they're not immune to the dangers of stopping and being outside of their vehicle on the highway. Their training and best practices have been established through traffic incident management programs. So kind of our other reasons, we performed estimates to replace the I-15 call box system, and they came in between $500,000 and $700,000, excluding, of course, the ongoing service charges and maintenance costs. This would be a solar-powered, cellular-based system due to cost, simplicity, and reliability. Of course, this is a high-volume section of interstate. It's consistently patrolled by NHP and is an NDOT freeway service patrol route for some of the peak travel days. And we do emphasize using our programs like this because of the successes. Our freeway service patrol program has logged over 41,000 mitigations in the Las Vegas area in fiscal year 20. The rollout of 5G infrastructure would also play a factor with cellular coverage. It's set to provide substantial increases. The FCC has published estimates that over 300,000 small cell antenna installations will occur nationwide in the next 5 years. The FirstNet program administered by the Federal Department of Commerce is increasing coverage as part of the program to provide cellular service to first responders. And that's a priority-based service. They are predicting 97% coverage in Nevada and are under agreement with the state and the Division of Emergency Management currently. And that isn't exclusive to first responders. That just gives them a preemption if the call volumes are high and the system is at capacity. We're also starting to rely on traffic management platforms such as a product we have called Waycare. It is utilized to combine live agency data with data from a variety of applications. An example of this would be if a Waze users enter a crash or a disabled vehicle on a highway or interstate, Waycare will confirm this and display those details on our operators' dashboards so they can view them with our cameras, or they can route NHP to those scenes, or with roadside assistant features and automated emergency notifications. And this is, of course, involves all the way back to 1996 with the establishment of OnStar. And we did pull a couple of coverage maps this week. They're pretty consistent with all major carriers. That particular stretch of the road is fairly consistent with fifth generation coverage. Of course, there are dead spots throughout the state, particularly in mountainous regions. hoping those go down, but they're, we can address those, and they may be good opportunities, to leave the language we suggested in the NRS. That would give us the ability to install, spot call box locations as needed, and as the usage would kind of support the cost of the installation and the continued operations of that. And I would like to thank you, and that concludes my presentation, and I will be happy to answer any additional questions.
Thank you for the presentation. I believe we have just a few questions for you. Assemblywoman Summers Armstrong, we will start with you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Daniels, for your presentation. You mentioned Waycare, which is currently a crowdsourced sort of software. Is that correct?
That is correct, but they also pull all of our data from our traffic data, our flow sensor data, all of our weather data. So it is, yeah, it's a combination of that, but you are correct.
Do you think at any time there might be a cost associated with that gathering of data that might now put the accessibility to that data at risk?
We do pay for the service, and it is in conjunction with the RTC of Southern Nevada. Sorry, Seth Daniels for the record. Yeah, and the associated data generally, I would say a lot of that data is given to the DOT. We're part of the Ways Connected Citizens program, and that allows us free access both ways. They pull our data out of our 511 system, and there's no charge for us to use their data as well. So the partnerships are what we look at to make the best use of our funding.
One more question, if you might, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Go ahead.
Are you all considering looking to any other similar crowdsourced data so that you're not dependent upon just one relationship, just in case, things may go south, that you have a way to gather similar data, from another source, or just to get a different perspective, and also additional access and information gathering, so that if some people are not using Waze, if they're using something else for information, or to want to transmit information to you about an accident or something, that we're not just depending on one source. Thank you.
For the record, again, Seth Daniels. That is an excellent question, and absolutely. We have all of our traffic data lives in what we call the Nevada Data Exchange, and it is a free sharing platform where we can both give data and take data in through, I know it's a technical term, but it's APIs. That's the current method of sharing data. We do that. We have existing users such as the National Weather Service, University of Nevada, Reno, and UNLV all take advantage of that service. And that is a great platform for us to, get the best and lowest cost data, going forward. So absolutely, we are looking for other relationships.
Any follow-up, Assemblywoman? Okay.
No, ma'am. Thank you so much. I appreciate the information.
Thank you. Next up, we'll have Assemblywoman Brown. May?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Mr. Daniels, for that great presentation. First, I'd like to acknowledge that this report has been delivered to the Transportation Planning Advisory Committee over the course of the interim. And so there's a lot of really good information, even though we're really only looking at changing shall to may in this piece of legislation. Realize that there's a significant implication to that and the flexibility within the department. My question is really about cellular service and the lack of cell service in the mountainous areas. Is there any specific location that you can think of or have identified where perhaps a call box would be required or be necessary as a way to ensure people have access to safety?
So we do have 3 call boxes in existence in northern Nevada. 2 of them are on US 50 heading to Lake Tahoe, and one is on a particularly shielded and twisty part of Highway 431 up to Virginia City. Those were established, they maintained. Those are nowhere near end of life, and an effective tool. And I am sure there are other locations in the state, you know, maybe through a transition as our cell coverage grows. And, you know, any traveler who knows, especially as a passenger, you're frustrated when your signal dies and you're trying to get something done or something. So I completely understand, and as well as you really feel for, I don't know if everyone has, but I've certainly broken down in my younger days and been frustrated, and it is a difficult situation. So absolutely.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. And for our committee secretary, I'd like to let you know that Assemblyman Roberts has been able to join the meeting. Moving on to other members with questions, Assemblyman Ellenson.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. When you guys first put these in, it was 99.9% was to be used for like 911 calls, emergency calls only. Is that correct? And then they direct like a tow truck or an accident or something like this. Is that correct?
That was my understanding, yes.
Okay. And then the other question I've got is there any other places you plan to expand to across Nevada?
I would say we'd certainly be open to it. We do. Sorry, Seth Daniels for the record. We do get a lot of feedback. As you're aware, we have maintenance crews all over the state. We coordinate with Nevada Highway Patrol frequently. NDOT operates the Enos, the Nevada Shared Radio System, as you may know, and those kind of all overlap. Our maintenance workers have cell phones. They also operate our radio, and you know, we've put in additional radio sites due to problem coverage areas as well. So, you know, I think we would be absolutely open if there was a particular area of concern to look at an installation such as this. And that might not just be highways. It might be where a popular recreation area intersects with a highway, and you know, there has been incidents or something that would warrant that installation. Thank you.
Follow up, Madam Chair.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Madam. If you look through, once you go through Ruby Valley, all the way to Eureka, you have no cell service in there, and that's a 2-lane highway all the way. And it seemed like to me, if there was ever a good place to have them, would be along that road. And I've hit deer in there and tore the whole front end off of a truck. So there's no cell service. If there was a way that they could do it with some way of a better satellite system or a way to get to it, that'd be a great spot for them. And so, and then it goes up 50 all the way through there, 93. So I know NDOT's working on a lot of projects up that way, but it'd be great to see places like that, Tonopah, Hawthorne, and some of these other ones that have no cell service at all. These might be able to pick up better cell service than others. So, but just a recommendation. Thank you.
And I will note that, and I appreciate those comments. And being a former resident of Elko, I'm very familiar with the area. So, yeah, and bring those attentions, because you know, my group, Seth Daniels, sorry for the record, my group is working on the statewide fiber optic network. We do manage the radio system. We do partner with, you know, cell phone companies in certain locations, and we could absolutely reach out, you know, at least get some answers on plans to expand coverage or look at options of what we can do in those situations. So I appreciate the comment.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Madam Chair.
You are welcome. Our member with the last question is Assemblywoman Peters. I believe you have a few questions.
I may have a few questions. I'm going to start. Thank you, Madam Chair, for the question. And thank you, Mr. Daniels, so much for the presentation. Really well structured. I appreciated that. My question has to do with the language of the bill. So this may be more of a legal question, but do we have a legal definition for frequently traveled highways that's something we usually use for that definition?
Seth Daniels for the record. Not that I'm aware of. That may be more on the planning side. So if anyone else on the NDOT team, to me, I could certainly see that it seems a little ambiguous, especially as conditions have changed in Nevada since that bill was written. But
yeah, the bill itself I was reading, and that's an interesting way to make a statement and get to what they wanted to do. My other question has to do with the inclusion of frequently traveled highway in the bill, similar to what my colleague, Mr. Ellison, was talking about. There are some rather under-traveled freeways, and with the prolific, the availability of cell phone reception through most places, I almost think that those would be the most reasonable to identify and use as kind of a call service on, rather than frequently traveled highways where every car that goes by you is likely going to have a cell phone. So I'm just wondering if that's if you considered whether that is still applicable in this bill or not.
And Seth Daniels for the record, to answer that question, and I think Nevada followed a lot of states in figuring that it would have to be a fairly high volume road to justify the expense of putting these in, just so they're used frequently, and to justify not only installation but the required maintenance costs. But you could say frequently traveled is, like you said, ambiguous, and I would say through our research, a lot of states eliminated call boxes, based on usage, but some also did it based on the lack of cell service as well in spot locations. If there was a good junction or something in an area that, was a commonplace in an area without cell service, they would certainly keep, several of those call boxes there.
Thank you. Oh, I had one follow-up question. I apologize, Chair.
That's okay.
Thank you. And my question has to do with one of the statistics, or one of the scenarios which you cited, which were the call boxes on a bridge to assist people in finding resources for maybe suicidal thoughts. And I was wondering if that's an issue in Nevada, if we've identified places in which that is an area that we would consider continuing to use call boxes just for kind of a different mechanism than like emergency situations on a roadway.
Absolutely. I know they've done some other mitigations, and that the bridge over the Hoover Dam is a good example. They've done some other suicide prevention. But, and the reason I included that in my presentation is because I thought it was a great idea and a really good use of that technology. So, if there's, a frequent event somewhere, I think it's a wonderful idea for that type of crisis, because it is really concerning and disheartening.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. I see no other questions for you, so I thank you for the introduction for Assembly Bill 53. And with that, we will move on to testimony in support. Do we have any callers here to testify in support of Assembly Bill 53?
To testify in support of Assembly Bill 53, press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Chair, we have no callers in support of Assembly Bill 53.
Thank you. Do we have any callers in opposition?
To testify in opposition of AB 53, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Chair, we have no callers in opposition at this time.
Thank you. Do we have anyone in neutral?
To testify in neutral of Assembly Bill 53, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Chair, we have no callers in the neutral position at this time.
Thank you. Do we have any final remarks from the presenters on this bill before we close out the hearing?
None for me. I appreciate Seth Daniels. I appreciate your time and excellent questions.
Well, thank you for joining us today. And with that, we will close the hearing for Assembly Bill 53, and we will open the hearing for Assembly Bill 54, which creates the Advisory Committee on Traffic Safety within the Department of Transportation. And I will welcome the presenters for Assembly Bill 54 to the room. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Madam Chair, Vice Chair, and members of the committee. My name is Sandra Rosenberg. I'm the Assistant Director for Planning at the Nevada Department of Transportation. I'm here today to present Assembly Bill 54, the creation of an advisory committee for traffic safety. With me today is Amy Davey, Administrator of the Office of Traffic Safety. We also have some team members standing by to assist with questions if needed. I'd like to start with a little history on the committee and existing partnership in the world of traffic safety in Nevada. The Nevada Executive Committee on Traffic Safety was established in 2005 to facilitate the Strategic Highway Safety Plan. The SHSP is a federal requirement and requires that safety stakeholders are consulted during the development. The creation and facilitation of the committee not only helps us meet that federal requirement, but by bringing everyone together, creates a space for meaningful conversation about traffic safety and strategies to reduce deaths and serious injuries on our transportation system, including partnering on some of the most pressing issues. So the committee currently follows best practices for reducing deaths and injuries related to crashes. The committee looks at both causes as well as prevention measures. The committee reviews progress, provides guidance, addresses challenges, removes barriers, and receives recommendations from key area task forces and working groups. And I think that's an important piece to mention. I'm going to mention it probably a couple times, that the committee is kind of the overseeing and the policy portion of it, but a lot of the work occurs at the task force and working group areas. That's where the subject matter experts really get together to dig into specific safety issues. The NECTS currently consults the Strategic Highway Safety Plan on safety initiatives and provides support and assistance to specific strategies as appropriate, including recommending legislation at times. So this is the current structure of the Strategic Highway Safety Plan. It may look slightly different from the organizational structure you saw from the Office of Traffic Safety and the Nevada Executive Committee on Traffic Safety last week for two reasons. One, we're continuously evolving, and two, there's a slight difference between the organization of the plan and the organization of the committee and task forces. So what you saw last week was the actual task forces, which are driven by the critical emphasis areas, which is driven by the data, the leading causes of fatal crashes in our state. And so that's what creates the critical emphasis areas and the task forces. However, as mentioned in this committee last week, and often in our NECTS meetings, the top causes aren't the only causes, and we want to address as many issues, particularly those cross-cutting issues as possible. So for example, you'll see that we have or you heard that we have a task force on pedestrians, because that is really the number of pedestrians that are killed on our roadways is really, really frightening in this state and many others. So we have a task force specifically focused on that. However, the plan itself and that task force looks at the whole range of vulnerable road users and puts together strategies to address all of those. So we recently reorganized our plan into not just those specific top issues, but areas that we want to focus on, key areas. So safer roads, vulnerable road users, safer drivers and passengers, and impaired driving prevention. The traffic safety practitioners for years have focused on the E's. I think at one point there were 3, and then for a long time there were 4: engineering, education, enforcement, and emergency management systems. The past few years, we have added everyone, as we know it's not just the agencies who are responsible for engineering and enforcement, but we all need to work together, including the users of the transportation system. We've recently, just last year, added equity as the 6th and very critical E. Although it's a slightly different perspective, It's really critical that we do a better job, not just of looking at the numbers related to safety, but who is most affected, and wanted to put that in front by adding equity as a critical focus going forward. The state, both NDOT and OTS, and probably other agencies as well, have a number of federal requirements with respect to plans and programs related to traffic safety. I mentioned the Strategic Highway Safety Plan, for example, which in addition to being a requirement for safety planning, is also a requirement for creating the Highway Safety Improvement Program, which is the plan that actually allocates our federal safety funding to projects. So that's where we go from strategies and areas of focus to where our money goes with relation to those areas of critical emphasis. The project selection comes from the priorities and strategies identified in coordination with stakeholders in the Strategic Highway Safety Plan. In addition, both NDOT and Office of Traffic Safety have a number of federally required performance measures, some of which must be identical between the agencies, including the number and rate of traffic fatalities and the number of serious injuries. Other agencies likely have other measures that are required, but it's critical for any of us to meet our measures that we work together on the strategies to improve safety overall. That's the E for everyone. So the bill, as written, provides a broad group of stakeholders at the state and local level, one voting member from each of the entities listed here, unless otherwise specified. So NDOT and DPS have two. It really meets, we're trying to meet the proposed model of membership, which is statewide subject matter experts to meet our federal requirements. We have received, since information about this bill came out, we've received a number of requests for amendments to this bill with respect to membership. We're thrilled that so many people want to engage in the conversation about traffic safety. So we're reviewing those requests. We want to make sure we're coordinating with all the stakeholders and partners to move forward in traffic safety. We also want to have a manageable committee. As I mentioned, a lot of the work occurs at the task force and working group level, which anyone can join. And we strongly encourage folks who do have an interest to look at that structure of task forces and working groups to participate that way, because that's where a lot of the work occurs, and then it floats up to the sort of advisory committee. So we've discussed the background, the requirements, the membership. You probably want to know what's actually in, what this committee will be responsible for. And it's fairly basic and broad-reaching. They would review, study, and make recommendations regarding best practices for reducing deaths and injuries related to crashes, data on the cause of crashes resulting in death or serious bodily injury, as well as crash prevention measures, and other matters submitted by the chair, which of course would have to relate to transportation safety. Prepare and submit to the governor and legislature on an annual report concerning advisory committee activities, and if needed, establish working groups, task forces, or similar entities within or outside its membership for further study. We anticipate, if this bill goes through, that the existing task forces would continue to operate as they are, and we continue to evaluate those committees and whether we need additional ones or retire others. So with that, thank you so much for your time and interest in this bill. I'm happy to answer any questions. I also have with me, as I mentioned, the current Nevada Executive Committee on Traffic Safety Chair, Amy Davey, Administrator of OTS. In addition, we have Andrew Bennett and Fred Schockel on the line to assist with any specific technical questions.
Thank you so much. I know that we have a few members with questions. We are going to start with Assemblyman Roberts.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for the presentation. You know, this committee does such important work in improving traffic safety in our state. You know, when I was at Metro, we had participation on that committee, and I can't tell you how many times we would make changes to infrastructure to address issues that we were seeing in our community. I have one quick question. You have in section 1, maybe not section 1. All right, yeah, section 1, L. It says you have 5 members who represent local government entities appointed by the director. Would that include representations from the Regional Transportation Committee, or excuse me, Regional Transportation Commission, the RTCs, in specifically like Clark and Washoe County? Would those be included in those five people?
Sandra Rosenberg, and for the record, yes, that was the initial intent of those additional 5 members, and those are the types of questions we're getting and requests for amendments. So currently, the Metropolitan Planning Organizations, which includes the RTCs, are on the committee. So we want to reevaluate that if we name them by name or add them as kind of those additional 5 members. We also currently have NACO and League of Cities, so those are some of the other entities we were considering. We don't necessarily want to get, because the committee is large already, we don't necessarily want to get to every county having a representation. We feel like organizations such as NACO and League of Cities and the MPOs could potentially fill that function. And so that's the conversation we're having now with a lot of the stakeholders in terms of a potential amendment.
A follow-up real quick. So they would have to be one of those 5 members, and there's no intent to exclude them from being on the board, correct?
Sandra Rosenberg, for the record. That is correct. We certainly don't want to exclude anyone. We wanted to maintain some flexibility as we put this in statute as some of those roles change. However, we are evaluating the potential to potentially name some of those in the bill coming back in an amendment.
Great. I mean, I think that's a great idea. I'd hate to see them eliminated. They have so many, miles they travel within the jurisdiction, especially in Clark. I mean, they were a valuable member to us at Metro when we looked at traffic safety issues. I'd hate to see them left out. So thank you. I'm glad you're not doing that. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Next, we have Assemblyman Yeager.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair. Thank you for the presentation. I just had a couple of questions, I guess, and I think the first one is just a clarifying one. You just talked a little bit in response to Assemblyman Roberts' questions about the composition, and I just noted that we have 2 different, it looks like, proposed amendments that are uploaded on Nellis, and one of them reduces the local government entity from 5 to 3, but then adds 2 others, and then the other one talks about the Transportation Commission. So I just wondered if it wasn't clear from your answer, do you view those as friendly amendments, or are those still being worked on, just so we can kind of get a sense of what we're evaluating today?
Sandra Rosenberg, and for the record. Thank you. I think we had a little bit of confusion about whether or not you had received those amendments. So the answer is both. We do view those as friendly. And we are still working on it because we're getting additional requests. We just want to take a look at, make sure we're hearing all of the requests and looking at the wholesale membership to make sure it is statewide subject matter experts agency that have transportation safety as a primary role, but make sure we're not leaving out any really critical stakeholders. So yes, yes, they're friendly. Yes, we're still evaluating them, and we will come back with a more succinct combined amendment shortly.
Thank you so much. Madam Chair, may I ask another question? Thank you, Madam Chair.
Yes, go ahead.
Thank you. So you answered part of my question. My next question was just going to be about who typically chairs this committee. I think it's been around since 2005, so we have a 15 or 16-year history, and it sounds like Ms. Davey currently chairs it, which makes a lot of sense given her role. I just wondered if historically, is it normally end up being the executive director or the administrator of the Office of Traffic Safety, or are there other members who have typically chaired over the years?
Sandra Rosenberg, and that again for the record. That's an excellent question. In my time on the committee, it has typically been DPS or NDOT. So prior to Amy, I chaired it. Prior to that, I believe it was someone from NHP. However, the current vice chair, who will likely become the next chair, is actually Vincent Guthrow from NACO. So we do open it up to any members of the committee to either self-nominate or be nominated by another member of the committee. And we do like to kind of move it around. Other members haven't always volunteered for that role, so it has typically been NDOT or DPS, but it is open to a variety of members and stakeholders to chair that.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Assemblywoman Summers Armstrong.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair, for the acknowledgement, and thank you, ma'am, for the presentation. I am curious as to why there is no request to have anyone from civilian life on this committee as a representative, maybe one from each of these large entities who have a number of people that they can nominate. And the reason being is, in my other life, I know that we have organizations that are pedestrian safety centered. We had a horrible accident down in Southern Nevada with some bicyclists. We have groups in our community who do this, safety for children walking, safety for regular pedestrians, and safety for bicyclists. And I'm wondering if someone from those groups might not be able to bring a perspective to the table that is not so much government centered. Sometimes we get caught up in our acronyms and the things that we see and know, and maybe not be really boots on the ground from just a regular person's perspective. Just kind of curious. Thank you.
Thank you for that question, Sandra Rosenberg, NDOT, for the record. And I may ask Amy to fill in a little bit as well. We would certainly be open to that. We have had civilians or members of organizations who have an important role in this participate, just not as voting members. So currently our meetings are noticed. They're open. They're welcome to anyone to join, currently virtually, but when we used to meet in person, we would have, the voting members identified, but a number of other members would join and participate in the conversation. Additionally, as I mentioned, those task forces where a lot of the work is occurring. So I believe we do have some advocacy groups that are actively involved in vulnerable users, particularly pedestrians, and likely some of the other task forces. Ms. Davey, can you add some detail to that, if possible?
Amy Davey, Office of Traffic Safety. Sandra is correct. We do have a number of advocacy groups, and including interested individuals that participate in our task forces. They're quite involved in bringing forth recommendations, giving input, and I think that the structure of the committee historically has really come quite a bit out of our federal requirements, and which are, outlined as organizations with a primary focus on traffic safety, transportation safety, public health, school safety, those types of things. But that's a wonderful question, and something for us to certainly consider.
And I'm just going to add to that, Sandra Rosenberg, and that in other committees that we operate, we have had some challenge in making sure those citizen members can participate regularly and not run into an issue with quorum. So we can look into that issue, but if it's okay with everyone, I think having them continue to operate as they are is probably most beneficial.
Okay, next up we have Assemblywoman Peters.
Thank you, Chair. My question has to do with one of your amendments, the amendment to add 2 members from the research units at NCHI. And I'm wondering about the history of this. Have you had have you had folks who are doing research on the committee previously and would these be voting members, I guess, are my first 2 questions. And then I just can't encourage enough having that kind of voice on committees today as we talk about infrastructure advancement, particularly around transportation, as we're addressing issues related to electric vehicles that are just, in their baby stages of understanding. So, but if you could answer the question about the history of having folks like that on the committee.
Sure. Sandra Rosenberg, NDOT, for the record. I may pull Amy back in for this one as well. Again, I think that amendment may have been a little premature, but the system of higher education has been very active in this committee. They have not previously been voting members. but they're very active, particularly on the data collection and analysis side. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Amy to talk a little bit more about the system of higher education and their current and anticipated future participation.
Absolutely. This is Amy Davey with the Office of Traffic Safety. And as Sandra correctly stated, they have representatives from the Nevada System of Higher Education have been actively involved in our working groups, task forces, and have not previously held a position on the in terms of voting. They actually approached us and said that they felt there was a natural nexus, in particular UNLV's Transportation Research Center and the UMC and the UNLV School of Medicine, Trauma and Emergency Medical Services. They actually perform a lot of research and data analysis for us as well related to trauma outcomes in traffic safety issues. So that's the genesis of that amendment that you see.
Well, again, I love the idea of having folks who are working in this area in the day-to-day really be participants on the committee and look forward to seeing how you guys flesh out these amendments.
Assemblyman Levitt.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So mine is just kind of a little bit of a follow-up on Assemblyman Roberts and Assemblyman Yeager's line of questioning. So in your friendly amendment, you had mentioned that you were looking at potentially adding the RTCs by name as far as placeholders in the committee. Are you also adding MPOs, Metropolitan Planning Organizations, by name as part of the committee, or is that part of the friendly amendment as well?
Sandra Rosenberg, NDOT for the record. Our terminology in Nevada sometimes gets a little confusing. The RTC of Southern Nevada and the RTC of Washoe County are the MPOs for those metropolitan regions. So the intent of when we say the RTCs, those are the ones we're referring to. The additional MPOs would be Carson Area MPO and the Tahoe Regional Planning Agency.
Thank you for that clarification. I think that, yeah, the acronyms get a little interesting sometimes, so I appreciate that. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. And then I believe the final member with a question is Assemblyman Watts.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. I have I have one quick question and then a follow-up that's a little bit more of a comment or request. So the question that I have relates to the item K, the member who represents Indian tribes. And I noticed just in the language of the bill, it notes appointment by the director of the Department of Transportation. I know on some other bodies, the representative is designated by the Intertribal Council of Nevada, or in some cases is representing the Nevada Indian Commission. So I was just wondering if you could speak to that, if that was intentional. What I believe I looked up, and the executive committee has a Intertribal Council member. So I was just wondering if you could speak a little bit to that and how you see the process of a tribal member being appointed to this body.
Absolutely, Sandra Rosenberg, NDOT for the record. Yeah, so in the past, it has been the Intertribal Council. We have recently improved relationships with the Nevada Indian Commission. So I think we would probably consult with both entities to determine an appropriate appointment. I know some other state committees have recently specifically named the Indian Commission. So that's something, I think the idea in listing it in the way we have it is to provide that flexibility and work with both of those groups to find the most appropriate representation.
Thank you for that. I appreciate that clarification. And I would just encourage you to make sure you touch base with both the Intertribal Council and the Indian Commission to make sure that the language in the bill respects tribal sovereignty and their wishes and how that position is filled. And that kind of leads into my other request. And I understand from the other questions and discussion on the bill so far that we're still working out what the final membership roster is going to be. But I would just ask that before work session, once those things are kind of settled, it would be really helpful if you could provide to the committee members a comparison between the current executive committee makeup and whatever the proposed makeup is that you land on after finishing your conversations with these other interested parties, so that we can see who's staying, who's being added, and who's being subtracted.
Sandra is bringing up for the record. We would be happy to do that, along with an explanation of why, if there are some changes, why we're recommending those changes to the current committee.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, and very good suggestions. So once you have that put together, if you'll send it to the committee manager, she will get it to all the members on the committee. I'm seeing no other questions from members. So I will ask staff, we will move to callers for support. I believe there are a few callers in the queue for support.
To testify in support of AB 54, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Caller with the last 3 digits of 398. Please slowly spell and state your name for the record. You may begin.
Good afternoon, and thank you, Madam Chairwoman and members of the Assembly Committee on Growth and Infrastructure. My name is Sabra Newby, SABRA-NEWBY, and I am representing the University of Nevada, Las Vegas. We are in support of AB 54 with the friendly amendment submitted specifying 2 members of the research units of the Nevada System of Higher Education. At UNLV, one of our state's 2 R1 Carnegie High Research Activity institutions, we believe that research is best when it can benefit the lives of our citizens and improve our community. To that end, we support the inclusion of experts who experience in this area of trauma care and injury prevention, as well as transportation engineering on this committee, and stand ready to help our state improve outcomes for traffic injuries. Thank you.
Thank you. The next caller for support.
Caller with the last 3 digits of 300. Please press star 6 to unmute. Please slowly spell and state your name for the record. You may begin.
Good afternoon. For the record, Michael Hillerby, MICHAELHILLERBY, on behalf of the Regional Transportation Commission of Washoe County. We'd like to offer our support today for the bill with the amendment from NDOT that includes our suggestion that the representatives of the state's 4 metropolitan planning organizations be involved in the committee. RTC Washoe, like our sister organizations, has within its jurisdiction some of the state's busiest and most heavily traveled roadways. Because safety is a paramount concern, and in our mission, we think it's appropriate we be a part of the committee that proposed in the bill, and look forward to working with the other members. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next caller for support.
Caller with the last 3 digits, 876. Please press star 6 to unmute. Slowly spell and state your name for the record. You may begin.
Good afternoon. It's Angela Castro, CASTRO, with the Regional Transportation Commission of Southern Nevada. On behalf of the RTC Southern Nevada, thank you for the opportunity to express support for AB 54 as amended that would include the Metropolitan Planning Organizations. AB 54 promotes a collaborative approach to developing sound policies to improve traffic safety. This is a vital strategy for supporting economic development and infrastructure growth and enhancing the quality of life for Nevada residents. As the region's traffic management agency and the Metropolitan Planning Organization, the RTC collaborates with our federal, state, and local partners in promoting regional traffic safety. AB 54 would enhance cooperation and collaboration among a variety of agencies with a direct role in making transportation safer in Nevada. We are grateful for the Nevada Department of Transportation and NDOT Director Christina Swallow, as well as the Department of Public Safety and Traffic Safety Division Administrator Amy Davey, for sponsoring this legislation and agreeing to amend AB 54 to specifically include Nevada's Metropolitan Planning Organizations as advisory committee members. We look forward to developing effective solutions for protecting drivers, passengers, and pedestrians on Nevada's roads and highways. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other callers in support?
Caller with the last three digits 232. Please slowly spell and state your name for the record. You may begin.
Thank you, Chair and members of the committee. My name is David Daslich, D-A-C-L-I-C-H. I'm the Director of Government Affairs for the Las Vegas Chamber of Commerce, here to testify today in support the regional traffic issue and statewide traffic issues of traffic safety are very important to our continued development. We would like to thank the department for bringing this legislation forward. We think through proper study and utilization of the information that this will lead to much better outcomes for everybody on Nevada's roads. We urge your support. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any other callers in support for AB 54?
Chair, we have no further callers in support at this time.
Thank you. Do we have any callers in opposition?
To testify in opposition of AB 54, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Chair, we have no callers in opposition.
Thank you. And finally, do we have any callers calling in neutral?
To testify in the neutral position for AB 54, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Chair, we have no callers in the neutral position.
Thank you so much. So with that, I will ask Ms. Rosenberg, do you have any final comments on AB 54 before I close the hearing?
I just want to thank everyone for their time, and we look forward to working with the various stakeholders as we finalize the proposed language in this bill.
Thank you. And we're looking forward to the final breakdown of the comparison. So at this time, I will close the hearing on Assembly Bill 54 and thank all the presenters from NDOT and the Department of Public Safety who've joined us here today. And members, that brings us to the last item on our agenda, which is public comment. So I will ask our staff if there is anyone in the queue who's wishing to make public comment.
If you would like to make public comment, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Chair, the public comment line is open and working. However, we have no callers at this time.
Thank you so much. So members, that will conclude today's meeting. I thank all of our presenters for joining us here today, our diligent staff for making this all easy virtually, the public who's joined us virtually to join in on the meeting, and for the members and the public watching. Our next meeting for the Assembly Committee on Growth and Infrastructure will be on Tuesday, March 2nd at 1:30 p.m., where we will be hearing 4 bills. And with that, today's meeting is adjourned, and I wish you all a pleasant day.